it's Bunny, and welcome to today's video and welcome to another WWE reaction. This video was recommended by LittleMan27 and he said you need to react to the New World Order's story. And this was not the first time that this has been recommended to me. There's a lot of videos about it. I did find a video by Cultaholic Wrestling. The true story of the NWO's failed WWE run. I don't know if this is the video that Little Man wanted me to react to, but this is the video I want you. I will go with this one. But if you have a specific video that you want me to react to, always mention the original creator of the video so it's easier for me to find it. Or like the original title so I can just copy paste and easy.
When it comes to introducing chaos to professional wrestling, no group can touch the prime of the New World Order. In the mid-90s, the promotional jumps of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash combined with the turning of Hulk Hogan to create a new foundation for insanely lucrative unpredictability on WCW programming. While the NWO did eventually peter out, those earlier days of the group made for landmark wrestling television. So much so that enterprising types have tried making magic out of the NWO template, though they've always fallen well short of the original success. Like
when you mentioned the original success, I'm saying there is a success there, even though I have no idea what is going on and I will be learning probably during this video. The reason is because even today, and I don't know how many years passed since NWO's existence, people and WWE fans have been mentioning it, talking about it, asking me to react about it. Like, it has an influence even today. So let's see why.
At the time, the WWE resurrected the black and white faction on their own show for a reboot that proved just as colorless as the group's logo. I'm Jack from Cultaholic Wrestling, and this is the true story of the NWO's failed WWE run.
Uh-oh. Sad. So cool intro.
If you weren't around for the New World Order's dizzying heyday, here's a little primer. In the spring of '96, WWF stars Razor Ramon and Diesel jumped ship to WCW, lured in by mouth-watering deals. They reverted to their real names, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and were presented as uninvited gatecrashers looking to take over the company. Weeks later, they were joined in their malevolent crusade by eternal babyface Hogan, upon which the monstrous trio dubbed themselves the New World Order. Quickly, the NWO began running roughshod over WCW. They attacked wrestlers with baseball bats and spray paint and commandeered the commentary table in order to broadcast their whimsical rhetoric. The group wasted no time expanding, welcoming the likes of The Giant, Sean Waltman, Marcus Bagwell, Scott Norton, Ted DiBiase, and treacherous executive Eric Bischoff, among many others. Seriously, many others. The NWO's in-ring promo segments sometimes looked like 30 tourists in black t-shirts waiting for a bus. The NWO monopolized the championship scene, as Hogan himself reigned as world champion for much of the next 2 years. They had their own spin-off pay-per-view and achieved co-branding with WCW on a number of other shows, such as WCW NWO Uncensored, for example. Not to mention the fact that the group's t-shirts were top sellers. You couldn't pan over a TV wrestling crowd without seeing the harshly stenciled NWO on black fabric hundreds and hundreds of times over. Eventually, though, the NWO frayed and fragmented, splitting into two factions. While the Nash-led NWO Wolfpack proved popular for a little while, the freshness of the NWO had faded by the latter half of 1998. An unholy reunion at the dawn of '99 was met with derision and disinterest, especially since it was the byproduct of the notorious finger poke of doom angle. The NWO brand never recovered, and the Hogan-led revival faded to black by mid-March. The sad sack remnants of the black and white faction tooled around in the undercard, and a turn-of-the-century rendition led by Bret Hart was done in by ill-timed injuries. 1 year later, the WWF bought up everything of value from the WCW yard sale, including intellectual properties. So if the New World Order was ever going to see the light of day again, it would have to be in the company that the outsiders initially walked away from. The WWF may have won the Monday Night Wars in 2001, but by the end of the year, they were no longer in mint condition. The wrestling fad of the late 90s was burning out by the time both WCW and ECW went belly up. The ill-fated Invasion storyline proved to be a monumental disappointment, as did a heel turn for top star Stone Cold Steve Austin. To illustrate how bad things had gotten, the 2001 Survivor Series was the battleground for the WWF and the WCW/ECW union to settle the score once and for all. But ticket sales for the event were dismal, with many premium seats still available in the waning days before the card. Raw ratings for this period as well had dropped to lows not seen since the early days of the Attitude Era. The WWF wasn't in any danger of folding, but there was an obvious decline in interest. They may have been the last promotion standing, but they were definitely slouching over a little bit. Nonetheless, it was a bit of a surprise in December of 2001 when the news mail had it that the WWF was negotiating with Kevin Nash about a possible return. Granted, the WWF did bring back Ric Flair the previous month, but that was for an authority figure or part-time wrestler kind of role. The WWF had drummed out most of the old-timers over the preceding years and had often even mocked WCW for being a haven for fossilized old-timers. But Nash was 42 with a history of leg injuries and wasn't exactly known for being like an elite-level in-ring performer. Plus, there was also the political element. Nash was known for being part of the heavily lobbying clique in his prior WWF run and for having booking power at times in WCW. For many reasons, bringing Nash in just didn't make sense when one considered the faster-paced and backstage more harmonious WWF of the time. Nash was initially tethered to a tour with the Australian-based World Wrestling All-Stars, but by the early days of 2002 had agreed to a multi-year deal to return to the WWF. By mid-January, Hall and Hogan agreed to terms as well. This was in spite of a meeting that took place at the live January 3rd SmackDown in Washington, D.C. Vince McMahon queried his roster and staff about bringing the founding NWO members back, and reportedly, hardly anyone in the room spoke in favor of doing so. Many individuals either knew them from WCW or even earlier WWE stints and had no interest in revisiting the politics, the BS, or the drama. There was also concerns that the age of the three would be starkly evident at a time when pushed wrestlers like Chris Jericho, the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, Rob Van Dam, Booker T, and Kurt Angle were spearheading the slickest, fastest-paced WWF action ever produced. Despite the concerns and otherwise flat response to the proposal, McMahon rehired all three anyway. Word of the trio's signing reached the WWF locker room during a house show loop of Texas the second weekend of January, and it was said that morale bottomed out as a result. Business-wise, bringing the three back did make a little sense. Plans to introduce a brand split required as much star power as possible, and after so much stagnancy, the WWF could do with some fresh matchups. The hope, of course, was that the locker room atmosphere wouldn't be poisoned. And speaking of poison, that's how Hogan, Hall, and Nash were initially presented to the WWF audience. At the 2002 Royal Rumble, McMahon lost to Flair in a street fight, a fun little smoke and mirrors brawl between two charismatic 50-somethings. The two men were storyline co-owners of WWF at the time, and McMahon was fed up with his 50-50 partner thwarting his attempts to rule with an iron fist. However, the babyface Flair duly embarrassed him at the Rumble. On that week's SmackDown, McMahon appeared in a series of unnerving vignettes where he mused with heavy emotion to his dressing room mirror while sitting in an office chair. The unhinged Vince spoke of the WWF's impending death due to Ric Flair's meddling and vowed that he wouldn't let Flair kill his company because he was going to kill it first. Vince then threatened to inject the WWF with a so-called lethal dose of poison. He then spun around in his chair to reveal a crudely drawn NWO logo on the backrest, which we saw in the mirror, which means that the logo was actually drawn on in reverse. It's a minor point, but I felt like noting it anyway. It's quite fun, isn't it? So yes, the NWO was coming to kill the WWF. Cue some genuine intrigue among fans who remembered the good side of the NWO. Chaos, action, suspense, and a sense that anything could happen at any given moment. It certainly beats the status quo that Raw and SmackDown had become over the prior year. The suspense continued thanks to an excellent segment on the ensuing Raw, where Flair tried to talk McMahon out of bringing the NWO in, going so far as to play the timeless Lonely Road of Faith video to show all of the WWF goodness that Vince would be callously wiping out. A desperate Flair asked Vince, who wouldn't even look him in the eye, what he could do to get McMahon to call off the dogs. And Vince finally spoke, saying that if Flair sold him back his shares of the WWF and then quit, he would cancel the NWO invasion. But if Flair refused, Vince would spitefully watch from the sidelines as the NWO killed his creation. This was compelling television on the strength of of Flair and McMahon masterfully getting across all of these high stakes, making the viewers want to see what happened next. And what happened next was Flair nearly selling his shares on Thursday's SmackDown before Steve Austin talked him out of it. The two left Vince laying, and Flair tore up the sale papers, essentially telling the evil boss to do his worst. In the weeks ahead, Hogan, Hall, and Nash appeared in starkly lit video packages, hyping up their impending arrival. And said arrival would take place on February 17th at No Way Out, which was appropriate given the event name's initials. Look, NWO. Oh, it's clever. This begged the question, what will the NWO be doing when they arrive? Well, this was never really made clear, as it was just, hey, Hogan, Hall, and Nash will be in Milwaukee come the 17th, so call your local pay-per-view provider, etc., etc. We didn't actually know what killing the company entailed. And come February 17th, we were still left in the dark. At the start of No Way Out, Hogan and the Outsiders entered to the classic New World Order theme. They cut very insincere promos about how they're not the bad guys and they just wanted to go with the flow. It should be noted that in WCW, what made Hall and Nash special was their obvious rebel spirit. Whether they were jumping the guardrail armed with baseball bats or cutting self-indulgent promos laced with sardonic humor, the Outsiders were known for being a couple of too hip-for-the-room wise-asses who did what they wanted, when they wanted. But here, they, along with Hogan, were just two guys reciting mostly scripted verbiage. And when the three were then verbally cut down by The Rock in a very admittedly funny backstage segment less than 2 hours later, the NWO was no different than anybody else in WWE at the time. Just three guys in t-shirts you can buy off the company website. By the night's end, the NWO managed to maintain a bit of dignity by beating up Austin after the main event, but it still wasn't the strongest presentation for the group. No Way Out did a healthy 575,000 pay-per-view buys, but that was based on intrigue, not eventual execution. After day one, the NWO just didn't feel all that special. But still, the WWF had to press on with the group's direction for the all-important WrestleMania 18 in Toronto. The plan was for Hogan to face Rock, while Austin would take on Hall. The latter bout was actually a point of contention for Stone Cold. While Austin denies rumors that he had heat with Hall, he saw the match as a demotion. He'd been unsatisfied creatively for many months and wasn't enamored with having to put the recently returned outsider over, which was the original plan. Hall, meanwhile, had his own problems. It's no secret that the bad guy had substance abuse issues for years beforehand, and that the WWF assumed a major risk in bringing him back. In the run-up to WrestleMania, Hall was reportedly partying a bit too hard for the WWF's liking. Additionally, Hall had reportedly ruffled a few feathers backstage after his return. Chris Jericho remembers him being snide and antagonistic towards others the day he came back.
That's me.
As one example, Jericho recalls Hall gushing to Bubba Ray Dudley about how great a move the 3D looked before adding, "Can't wait to kick out of it." In light of Hall's issues, the WWF reversed course by deciding to put Austin over him at WrestleMania. This created a new problem. It meant that both of the almighty NWO members wrestling at Mania were gonna lose, as Hogan was also scheduled to put over The Rock. Not that Hogan was gonna be a member of the NWO for much longer anyway. Rock and Hogan's arc began with a historic face-off the night after No Way Out. Hogan claimed that the fans had turned on him, The Rock refuted that claim, then went into the whole dream match iconography spiel before challenging Hollywood to the ultimate generational battle at WrestleMania 18. After milking the crowd reaction for every last drop, Hogan accepted the challenge. He then received a rock bottom, but it was the NWO that got the last laugh. The Outsiders attacked The Rock, and the three men proceeded to give The Rock an extensive beating. So extensive, in fact, that he required an ambulance ride to the hospital. An ambulance ride that was cut short when Hogan slammed a semi-truck into the ambulance. Nothing like a little vehicular homicide to spruce up the WrestleMania.
I like the look, though.
However, Rock wasn't dead or even injured at all, as he reappeared on television with nary a scratch. It did beg the question of how the NWO was going to kill the WWF when they couldn't even do it to a solitary human being with the use of a giant truck. Over the weeks ahead, the NWO just tooled around Raw and SmackDown like any other part of the show. Whereas the WCW version of the group loomed large even when they weren't on camera, the carefully scripted WWF didn't book the group like the boundless Hellraisers they were best known for being. This was ironic, since killing the company was their mission statement, and yet they were focusing solely on two opposing wrestlers, waiting in line for their ordained segments to come up. WrestleMania rolled around and the NWO did indeed go 0-2. Austin beat Hall in a pretty overbooked match, while The Rock defeated Hogan in a match for the ages. Known best for 68,000 fans at the Sky Dome going crazy for every little thing Hogan did. After Hogan went down in defeat, he made amends with Rock by promising not to hit him with any more trucks. Rock was like, oh, shucks, I appreciate that. But a show of respect between the two men brought out an irate Hall and Nash, who turned on Hogan. Rock made the save, helping drive the big scary outsiders away before posing with his childhood hero. In just 28 days, the WWF had taken the NWO arc from Here Comes Trouble to The Threat is Neutralized. 28 days. The WWF quickly realized that with the favorable crowd responses Hogan was drawing, like the overwhelming reaction to him throughout Access Fan Week, there could be money in another sort of Hogan nostalgia act, like the return of the red and yellow Hulkamania. But this left Hall and Nash to kind of twist in the breeze as a directionless two-man demolition unit, but not for long. Later that week, X-Pac reunited with his old Wolfpack buddies after months of being off TV. The following week, the reunited Wolfpack first faced Hogan and Rock in a handicap match before losing to those two plus Kane on SmackDown. And therefore, any notion that the NWO was a fearsome, all-powerful entity was surely dead by this point. In the first ever brand extension, the group was drafted to Raw. Contrary to the New World Order of the past, Hall, Nash, and X-Pac never did try to invade SmackDown and simply remained exclusive to one show. Kind of doing as they were told, really. Over the months ahead, stuff happened. They beat up Kane and stole his mask. They had uninspired matches involving Austin and Bradshaw. They welcomed former member Big Show to the fold after weeks of very obvious teasers. Along the way, they lost Hall, who, along with Mr. Perfect, was fired shortly after the infamous plane ride from hell. Hall was still struggling mightily with his demons and was in poor shape during the UK tour. In fact, there are reports that after returning to the States, a near unresponsive Hall was ferried through customs in a wheelchair. Once Hall was gone, the NWO lost any shred of relevance they had left. Booker T joined the group randomly and without explanation. Showrunner Flair aligned with the group despite being...
It's just like saying, oh, that's a cool group and we just need other cool people to just join us to make it as cool. Like, no, you are missing the whole thing.
Openly opposed to Vince bringing them back in the first place. And an inactive Shawn Michaels joined the NWO and almost immediately kicked Booker out, literally. Booker T and Goldust versus the NWO became a mid-card feud at best. It also ended abruptly when Nash, who had just returned from an arm injury that had sidelined him for a few months, tore his quadriceps mere seconds after tagging into a match. A week later, on the July 15th, 2002 episode of Raw, McMahon himself entered to the NWO's theme. He informed the audience that we would never hear that song again because the NWO was dead. 6 months earlier, the news sites were reporting on a possible NWO return, and now it was being spoken of in the past tense. All the good that came out of it was a lucrative Hogan nostalgia run and a commemorative NWO DVD, one of the first WWE releases actually that made good use of the WCW video library they'd acquired. In the end, the NWO didn't kill the WWF, High Court rulings did. Losses to a different group with a black and white logo resulted in the WWF changing its branding to WWE that May. If only the NWO had the panda on their side, they may have lasted longer. I mean, he clearly doesn't do jobs. So what went wrong with the NWO? Well, one could argue that the WWE version of the NWO wasn't likely to last long anyway. Between Hall's personal issues and the median age of the core members, it's hard to imagine the NWO running roughshod over the company deep into...
I mean, they could have done better, way better for sure. I mean, these guys could have immediately got into the situation where instead of feuding against Austin and The Rock, they could have recruited other younger ones and corrupted them, you know, or like taught them the ways and then make them follow for a reason, make them follow the NWO agenda. Not just like, oh, we lost members, let's just add other cool members and nobody will care. Like, no, you don't do that.
2002, let alone beyond that point. Of course, you might say that this New World Order could have added newer, younger members. Surely there were disgruntled mid-carders that could have gotten a new lease of life by selling out to the Black and White Army. Imagine Christian or Sean O'Hare or the Dudley Boys or whoever representing the next wave of NWO mercenary. Or Booker T joining the group with a better reason to do so. If the NWO was going to last, this sort of thing probably needed to happen because otherwise it was just a nostalgia act. But new members or not, this NWO wasn't faithful to the concepts that made it work in the first place.
Exactly, you have
there
to
were
stick to the
chaotic
agenda.
moments like the near-fatal beating of The Rock, but there wasn't really enough of that sort of thing. In the old days, the New World Order would take over the commentary desk at 8:17 on a Monday night and spend 2 hours goofing on the show while interfering in matches they had some investment in, before eventually trying to fend off an attack from a defiant hero. But the WWF mode of storytelling was more rigidly scripted, so this couldn't be possible. Every aspect of the program was planned out to the most minute detail, and that's good production-wise, but it doesn't allow for anything renegade-minded to seep its way in. The NWO needed room to stretch its legs, and that didn't work when it was boxed up in tightly produced segments. The cliched phrase of "they're not supposed to be here" only works if the camera doesn't happen to be in the right place for every cut. And because the NWO was confined to designated parts of the show, they didn't feel as important as they once did. They were never truly the dominant force of the show because they didn't take on the world, just hand-selected main eventers 1 or 2 at a time. And sometimes they even got their asses kicked. Contrast that to the best version of the NWO, who hit the ring like bloodthirsty dogs, looking to take down the whole empire. Again, WWF's mode of producing TV was never going to accommodate that possibility. In the stable's first year in WCW, they almost never came up empty.
This is what I need. So I need to like find a video where it explains the rise of NWO, not only the fail of it in WWE, so I can know how much more epic they were before their destruction, you know?
Because they needed to be cemented as an unstoppable force. On night 1 in the WWF, the 3 of them stood there like petrified doofuses while The Rock made fun of their old catchphrases. Classic New World Order kicked the door down, but the WWE version only showed their stuff after knocking on the door first. The final go-around New World Order was a toothless, soulless, entirely plastic imitation of the influential group that once bore its name. And instead of facilitating a hostile takeover, the black and white faction was instead easily overtaken.
Okay. What a video. I completely agree with everything, and I think that they didn't know what to do with them, and it could have been done so much better. Like, the usage of these legends could have been done much better. I think it was a case of bad luck. It was going well, but Hogan got a hero's welcome and turned face. Nash got injured. Hal was dealing with his issues. He got through it eventually, and the whole thing just sputtered out. The thing is that the agenda was not there. The motivation to do what they were doing was not there. It kind of was contrast. Like, they are now joining again at the same company that they rebelled about, and yeah, like it was difficult to just continue where you left off. Writing that NWE logo on Vince's chair backwards to read it clearly in a mirror was clever, unless Vince really wanted to bring in the One Warrior Nation instead. I've said it for over 20 years. Most fans, myself included, didn't see it as the NWO coming into the WWF. It was Razor Diesel and Hulk Hogan coming home. Yeah, exactly. And then they should not have entered WWE or WWF with the NWO shirts, you know? Like, they should have specifically, like, find a way to, like, just end NWO and come back as Razor Diesel and Hulk Hogan, if that's what they wanted from the start. Or, like, just find a way to disrupt the whole NWO, or have it, like, give it a better ending, you know? Or give it a new beginning. But they failed on both terms. But that is it, guys. I can't wait to actually react to another video that is more about the epicness of NWO, the start of NWO, and to learn more about it before seeing this downhill road here, because a lot of people are fans, and I want to know why. So let me know in the comment down below from which creator should I react to. But that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. Have a wonderful day, and see you tomorrow with a brand new video. But before you go, I also do upload on my Patreon, patreon.com/supportbunny, a lot of WWE content, SmackDown, Raw, on a weekly basis, as well as long-term documentaries like the Undertaker documentary or Bray Wyatt. You can check it out there. Patreon.com/supportbunny. That's it. Have a wonderful day. See you. Bye.